A dedicated teacher was fired for buying a new pair of shoes for a poor student in her class. Her act of kindness cost her the job she loved, but as soon as the door closed, an unexpected phone call from a powerful billionaire opened a new path. From a small classroom, she began her journey to help thousands of children across the country. And then, it was her simple kindness that application changed not only her life, but also the lives of many others. Welcome to Kindness Stories, where small but meaningful stories are told to warm your heart. Today, we will explore a story about a teacher's simple kindness and the miracle that happened afterwards. Listen to see that sometimes a small act can change a life. Hopewood Elementary School is nestled in a small town in the southern United States where life is still difficult. The old painted walls, simple playground, and children's laughter, echoing every morning, have become familiar images for Sarah Mitchell during her 6 years as a teacher here. Sarah is a woman in her 30s. Her simple brown hair is always tied back. She loves teaching more than anything and considers her students as her own children. For Sarah, education is not only about imparting knowledge, but also about caring and nurturing the faith of each child. In Sarah's class was Tommy Jacobs, a skinny, quiet 8-year-old boy. Tommy lived with his mother in a cramped apartment in a low-income area of town. Tommy's sneakers had worn soles and torn toes, so he tried to hide his feet under the desk or walk quietly so no one would notice. But kids always noticed. During recess that day, Sarah stood by the classroom window and accidentally saw Tommy sitting in the corner of the yard, looking sadly at his classmates running around and playing. One child shouted, "Hey, Tommy, your shoes are about to fall off," and the whole class burst into laughter. Sarah's heart clenched. She remembered the moment Tommy had walked into class that morning, his eyes hesitant, as if he wanted to say something, but then fell silent. Sarah decided she couldn't ignore him. That afternoon, after school, Sarah walked past the small shoe store on the corner. She stopped and looked at the plain blue sneakers that she knew Tommy would like. Even though her monthly budget was small, Sarah dug into her old wallet and bought the shoes. "Because Tommy deserves to run and laugh like any other kid," she told herself. The next morning, Sarah carefully placed the shoebox on Tommy's desk with a small card. "I am so proud of you. Keep going strong, Tommy." Tommy opened the shoebox, his eyes shining. He ran around the classroom showing off his new shoes with a big smile. But at that moment, other eyes started to turn to Sarah, and the story didn't stop in this small classroom. Tommy's excitement over his new shoes quickly spread throughout the classroom and hallways of Hopewood. His friends, initially curious, then excited, gathered around to admire and ask questions. Tommy was beaming like never before, as if the new shoes had erased a long-standing inferiority complex. Sarah stood in the corner of the classroom, smiling with satisfaction as she watched Tommy walk with a confidence she had never seen before. But the joy didn't last long. At the end of the school day, Sarah received a text message from Mr. Harrison, the principal of Hopewood, asking her to come to his office immediately. Sarah was surprised and worried. She thought about Tommy's shoes and wondered if something was wrong. When I entered Mr. Harrison's office, the atmosphere was unusually tense. He sat behind a large desk with a stern look on his face, surrounded by a few of Sarah's colleagues, including Ms. Carter, who was in charge of supervising the activities of teachers in the school. "Sarah, I just heard about your actions this morning," Mr. Harrison said, his voice low and cold. "What action?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "You bought new shoes for Tommy Jacobs, right? That's a serious violation of school policy." Sarah was stunned. "I just wanted to help Tommy. He didn't have the right shoes and the other kids were teasing him. I thought it was just a little thing." Mr. Harrison shook his head, his eyes unwavering. "Sarah, you know very well the school rules. Teachers are not allowed to give gifts to students. We have to ensure fairness for all students here. Your actions, even if well-intentioned, will set a bad precedent and cause discrimination." Ms. Carter added coldly, "How do you think the other students will feel? parents will complain that we are being unfair. You have put the school in an awkward situation." Sarah tried to explain, her voice shaking. "I didn't think that far ahead. I just saw a child in need, and I did what my heart told me to do. Isn't that what we should do as educators?" But Sarah's pleas were in vain. "Your actions, however personal, were a violation," Mr. Harrison declared. "I have had to suspend you pending further review. We will make a formal announcement next week." Sarah left the office with a heavy heart. She felt as if everything had fallen apart around her. In the days that followed, news of the incident spread quickly through the school and the small community. A few teachers were sympathetic, but many others avoided Sarah, afraid of being implicated. Her students, though they had no idea what had happened, could sense the tension and heaviness in the air. Tommy, the boy who had become the center of the story, quietly approached Sarah during lunch break. "Miss Sarah, is it my fault that you are in trouble?" he asked, his eyes moist. Sarah leaned down, put her hand on Tommy's shoulder, and smiled weakly. "No, Tommy, don't ever think like that. I'm so proud of you." That evening, Sarah sat alone in her small apartment, staring out the window and thinking about what had happened. A small act, born of compassion, now put her at risk of losing the job she had devoted her entire youth to. She wondered if she had done something wrong, or if the education system had become too rigid and insensitive. The next day, the official announcement arrived. Sarah Mitchell had been fired for violating school policy. The news immediately caught the attention of the local media. Headlines began to appear. "Teacher fired for buying shoes for poor students." Little did Sarah know that in a remote office hundreds of miles away, a powerful man was reading this story and feeling moved. 3 days after Sarah Mitchell was fired, she barely dared to leave her small apartment. The news spread like wildfire through the town, and her story went beyond the local area. Major newspapers began carrying headlines like "Teacher fired for kindness" and "Insensitive education policy. Teacher loses job over a pair of shoes." Social media commentary was divided. One side criticized the school for being too rigid. The other accused Sarah of not following the rules. Sarah turned off her phone, avoiding any news. She just sat quietly by the window, looking out at the empty street below, feeling like everything was spinning out of control. The meaningful days of teaching were now just memories. The laughter of the students in the classroom, the innocent questions of the children, and Tommy's happy eyes when he put on his new shoes, all of them lingered in her mind. Then one quiet afternoon, just as Sarah was about to close her laptop to forget everything, her phone rang. Seeing the unfamiliar number on the screen, she hesitated a bit before picking up. "Hello, I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said, her voice tired. "Hello, Miss Mitchell, this is Daniel Carter," said a deep male voice on the other end of the line. "You may not have heard of me, but I came across your story in the paper. I was very moved and would like to talk to you if you have a moment." Sarah frowned slightly. Daniel Carter. The name sounded familiar. She remembered he was the famous billionaire founder of the Carter Foundation, a giant charity that supports education and disadvantaged children. I'm not sure why you called me Mr. Carter," Sarah replied, still surprised. "Just call me Daniel. And the reason is simple. I found your actions meaningful," Daniel said softly. "I grew up in a poor family and used to go to school with torn shoes. That day, a teacher helped me without anyone knowing. Your actions may be criticized, but I understand your heart and your intentions." Sarah sat there, her eyes stinging. For the first time in days, she felt like someone actually understood her. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. Daniel continued, "Your story reminds me of why I founded the Carter Foundation. We are always looking for people like you, people who are not afraid to act for others, no matter the cost. I have a proposition for you." Sarah held her breath. "What offer?" "I would like to invite you to work at the Carter Foundation, and as a research engineer, I'd like to assist you in returning all programs as soon as possible." I need a manager for our educational projects, especially programs to support disadvantaged children. With your experience and heart, I believe you will do a great job." Sarah could hardly believe her ears. I'm not sure I can do it. I'm just a small school teacher in a small town." Daniel chuckled. "People who make big changes always start small, Sarah. I will give you all the resources you need, and more importantly, you will have the opportunity to help more children than just one boy like Tommy. This is your chance to turn your kindness into something great." Sarah was silent. Her mind was in turmoil with conflicting thoughts. All she had ever known was standing on a podium, watching her students grow up. But now, a new door was opening before her eyes, a door she had never thought of. "Do you really think I can do it?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with doubt. "I not only believe, I am certain," Daniel said firmly. "Think about this offer, Sarah. I will send you the details of the job and look forward to hearing from you soon." The call ended, leaving Sarah sitting in the quiet room. She looked up at the sky outside the window, where the sunset was slowly falling. A soft light shone through the glass, as if the universe was telling her that a new journey was about to begin. That night, Sarah lay awake, thinking about Daniel Carter's offer. She remembered Tommy's smile and why she loved this job. Perhaps this was the opportunity life had given her, a chance to turn her simple kindness into something more meaningful than ever. Carter Foundation headquarters in New York City. The towering, modern, and elegant building took her breath away. Sarah had gone from a small-town teacher to a completely different world, where large-scale projects were being implemented to help thousands of children across the United States and beyond. As she entered the main lobby, she was greeted by Rebecca Lee, Daniel Carter's assistant. Rebecca was a sharp and enthusiastic woman who quickly introduced Sarah to the team. "Welcome to the Carter Foundation, Sarah. We are excited to have you join us and bring fresh ideas," Rebecca said with a bright smile. Sarah was led into Daniel's office. He greeted her with a warm and welcoming handshake. "We are so glad you accepted our invitation. I believe your small gesture with Tommy is just the beginning of bigger things." Daniel handed Sarah a brochure of the Foundation's current projects and gave her her first assignment, the One Step Forward project, which provides shoes and other necessities to needy children across the United States. "I want you to manage this project from start to finish. Think of it as an opportunity to show what you can do," Daniel said. The first few days at the Carter Foundation were challenging. Sarah quickly realized that the job was not as easy as she had imagined. Instead of teaching and caring for a small class, she now had to work with hundreds of people, from funding partners, operations teams, to community activists across the country. She sat in front of her computer for hours, reading through reports and lists of areas in need. Every time she looked at the pictures of barefoot children, she thought of Tommy and told herself she had to do better. During an important meeting about the project budget, Sarah had to present her idea to the Foundation's board of directors. "I believe that providing shoes is not only about making it easier for children to get to school, but also about making them feel more confident and motivated in life," Sarah said, her voice trembling but determined. Some members of the committee were skeptical. An older man spoke up. "Ms. Mitchell, this sounds like a great idea, but the cost of distributing shoes to thousands of children nationwide is not small. We need a more concrete and feasible plan." Sarah took a deep breath, suppressing her anxiety. "I've done some research and contacted local shoe manufacturers. They're willing to work with us at a lower cost if we commit to a larger quantity. Additionally, we can mobilize volunteers in local areas to minimize shipping and distribution costs." Daniel, who had been sitting silently since the beginning of the meeting, smiled with satisfaction. "I think Sarah is right. Let her try her hand at this project." The meeting ended with consensus, and Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. It was the first time she really felt like she could do this. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and her team worked tirelessly. She flew to several states to meet with shoe manufacturers, work with local communities, and organize fundraisers. Each time she visited a new area, Sarah encountered children just like Tommy, barefoot, eyes sad but hopeful. Those moments motivated her to work even harder. However, things weren't always smooth sailing. Late one afternoon, Rebecca walked into Sarah's office with a worried look on her face. "Sarah, bad news. One of our shipping partners is having trouble, and the first shipment of shoes will be delayed by at least 2 weeks." Sarah felt like everything was falling apart. Thousands of shoes that were supposed to reach children were delayed. "We can't let this happen," Sarah said, determined. She and Rebecca searched for every possible solution, from contacting other partners to reorganizing the distribution schedule. Finally, thanks to the team's tireless efforts, the shoes were delivered on time. The first shoe distribution took place at a poor school in rural Texas. Sarah stood on the playground, watching the children line up with eager eyes. As the new shoes were handed out, laughter filled the schoolyard. A little boy about 7 years old ran up to Sarah, his eyes shining. "Thank you! Now I can run as fast as I can without hurting my feet." Sarah smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. She knew she had made the right choice. What she had done for Tommy had become something much bigger, something that would affect thousands of other children. That evening, Sarah received a call from Daniel. "I am proud of you, Sarah. The One Step Forward project is off to a great start. You have proven that kindness can change a community." Sarah looked out the hotel window at the night sky, filled with happiness and contentment. She realized that her life had entered a new and meaningful chapter. This was no longer just a job. This was her calling. "Thank you, Daniel," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "and thank you for believing in me." Daniel laughed. "It's not that I trust you, Sarah. You've proven yourself that you can do it." Sarah nodded. The image of Tommy in his new shoes flashed through her mind. Now she had found a new path, a path that her heart had always wanted. A year after Sarah Mitchell joined the Carter Foundation, the One Step Forward project expanded to dozens of states, donating more than 500 pairs of shoes to needy children across the United States. The media repeatedly cited the program as a prime example of turning simple kindness into positive change. Today, Sarah stood on stage in a large auditorium in New York, where the Carter Foundation was holding its annual celebration. Before her was an audience of donors, volunteers, and most importantly, the children who had benefited from her project. The lights were bright, but to Sarah the brightest things were the children's smiling faces. Daniel Carter stood beside her, smiling proudly as he introduced Sarah to the crowd. "We are here today to honor a very special woman. Sarah Mitchell not only helped us make a successful project, but also inspired us with her kindness and tireless dedication. Because of her, thousands of children have been given hope." The room erupted in applause as Sarah stepped up to the podium. She took a deep breath and looked around the room. "Thank you," she began, her voice soft but full of emotion. "A year ago, I was a small school teacher in a small town. I never thought that a simple act of mine, buying a pair of shoes for a student, would bring me here. I thought I had lost everything when I got fired, but now I know that sometimes when one door closes, another one opens that is bigger and more meaningful." She paused, looking down at the front row where Tommy Jacobs sat with his mother. Tommy was taller now, his face full of confidence. Sarah smiled and continued, "My story is not just about a pair of shoes. It is a story about kindness, about how one small act can change someone's life. But this story doesn't stop with me. It continues because of all of you, the people who have helped thousands of kids like Tommy. You are the reason we are here today." The applause rang out again, and Sarah stepped down from the podium with a heart full of pride and happiness. After the ceremony, Daniel Carter led Sarah to a small room at the back of the hall. There was a thick file on the table, and Daniel slid it toward her. Sarah, this is the next step I want you to take. We are going to establish the Sarah Mitchell Scholarship Fund to support children not only with shoes, but also with the opportunity to go to school and have better access to education. Sarah was so surprised she was speechless. A scholarship fund? In my name? Daniel nodded, a warm smile on his face. You deserve it. Your actions have inspired so many. Now, this scholarship fund will be your legacy, one that will last and change the lives of countless young people. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. She thought of all the children she had met over the past year, the eyes that lit up when they received new shoes, the shy but sincere words of thanks. She also thought of Tommy, who had unwittingly started this journey. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, her voice choking. "But I'm just a very ordinary person." Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady. "Sarah, it's ordinary people like you who can do extraordinary things." A few months later, Sarah, Daniel, and a group of volunteers returned to the small town where she had taught. Hopewood Elementary School was the same, with the same old walls and familiar playground. But this time, Sarah was no longer the teacher fired for violating policy. She was back as the head of her eponymous charity and a new hope for the students there. Tommy Jacobs stood in the crowd, now a tall, confident teenager. He stepped forward, took the microphone, and looked at Sarah. "Sarah, those shoes you gave me that day have taken me further than I ever thought possible. But more importantly, you taught me that sometimes small acts of kindness can make a big difference. I will always remember that." Sarah smiled, tears welling in her eyes. She looked around, seeing the familiar faces of her former students, colleagues, and townspeople. They no longer looked at her with the suspicion they had before. They looked at her with respect and admiration. Sarah stood on the school playground where she had once placed a new pair of shoes on Tommy's desk and silently thanked life for bringing her here. This journey had taught her that everything happens for a reason, and that sometimes seemingly tragic losses are the beginning of something greater. The sunset fell, covering the school in a warm yellow color. Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. She knew that her life was now complete, and more than ever, she understood the true meaning of kindness, helping others walk stronger, not only with their feet, but with their faith in life. Today's story shows us that sometimes a small act of kindness can make a big difference. Sarah Mitchell not only found meaning in life, but also inspired thousands of others. And you know what? Each of us has the ability to make a difference with our own kindness. Don't forget to spread the word by liking, sharing, and following kindness stories to continue receiving other heartwarming stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.